This monitor is a beauty. I mean, look at that clean and minimal design. And the specs are promising as well. 27-inch 1440p nano IPS display with a 165Hz refresh rate. On top of that, HP claims TN-like response times and a wide color gamut thanks to the nano-coated IPS display. That may sound suspiciously like the popular LG 27GL850 to you, and you're right. They actually share the same panel. So let's give the Omen a look. It's so refreshing to test a monitor with a decently short name, Omen 27i, that's it. Well, okay, there actually is that 8A-C94AA appendix, which doesn't seem to have any meaning yet. I'll just leave it here for now and let's hope HP doesn't decide to throw dozens of slightly different 27i's on the market. The special thing about the 27i is the panel. It's the LG LM270WQA, or what might be more familiar to you, the panel that can be found in the LG 27GL850 and the ViewSonic XG270QG, which both became famous for the TN-like response time despite being IPS monitors. The panel type can be confirmed by booting into the service menu. This can be achieved by pressing down the joystick while turning on the monitor. We will take a detailed look at the panel's performance in a bit, but let's first take a look at the monitor itself. In my opinion, this is how a gaming monitor has to look like. No Gamery logos, no red plastic applications. However, there is RGB. But it's nicely done and really subtle if you wanted to. And you can of course turn it off entirely as well. The lighting can be controlled through the Omen command center that installed automatically after connecting the 27i to my PC. I'm not sure whether to call that practical or encroaching. Anyways, this software gives access to all the RGB colors and even some color changing effects. And if you ever feel the need to read a good book under your monitor, the Omen has got you covered as well. I honestly don't know if this light has an intention other than being a design feature, but it could actually be somewhat useful as a reading light or if your keyboard isn't backlit. Another gimmick is the headphone stand, or at least what HP thinks could be used as a headphone stand. The edges will quickly destroy your earbuds, so you probably should not store your headphones here. The monitor's stand is mostly made of metal, apart from a few pieces that are plastic. Thankfully, the plastic parts are not easily distinguishable from the metal surrounding them, and the metal parts are beautifully crafted as well. The monitor itself seems to be almost completely made of high quality plastic, apart from the bottom frame, which likely is aluminum. Though I honestly had to look very closely to distinguish the plastic from the metal. HP's manufacturing and material choice is spot on. The 27i is beautifully designed and crafted. The same quality impression is given by the height adjustment, which feels sturdy and needs some force to move the panel up and down. Height can be adjusted in a wide range, pivot can be adjusted as well. Swivel cannot be adjusted. Now let's move on to the panel, which is unarguably the most important piece of any monitor. Starting with a macro shot, we get a closer look of the panel's coating and subpixel structure. Text is rendered clear, no complaints here. Zooming in reveals the subpixel structure and the anti-reflective coating. The Omen's maximum brightness is 357 kDs per square meter, so pretty much what's in the spec sheet. Turning the brightness all the way down gives us a white level of 14.4 kDs per square meter. That's pretty dim and great for using the monitor at nighttime. Roughly 140 kDs per square meter will be achieved at a brightness setting of 26. This is the brightness I'm using for the testing and calibration. At this brightness level, the 27i measures a black level of 0.22 kDs per square meter, which leads to a contrast ratio of 619:1. This is not a great value and a bit disappointing at this price point. The Acer VG270UP for reference, which also is a 1440p IPS high refresh rate monitor, measures a contrast ratio of 870:1 at the same brightness. So blacks are a bit grey on the Omen. Though there isn't much backlight bleeding with my unit. This picture pretty much represents what you can expect to see in a somewhat dim room with a reasonable brightness setting. I hope the pictures can be retained through YouTube's compression. Usually I don't like to comment on backlight uniformity as it can vary highly across different units, but I get many comments asking about backlight bleeding, so here you are, but please take it with a grain of salt. And for some reference, here again is the VG270UP under the same conditions with a brightness setting of about 114 kDs per square meters as well. The Acer looks a bit better at first glance thanks to its overall superior black level. though the backlight is slightly more uniform on the Omen 27i, but neither suffers from any notable backlight bleeding. Let's take a look at the panel uniformity with the white test image. The maximum brightness deviation can be found in the top left corner, with the image being nearly 20% darker than in the middle of the screen. On average, the brightness deviates 9.42%, what overall is a decent to good result, though the brightness deviation is perceivable on closer inspection. This is not relevant for general mixed usage, but will be for photo and video editing on a professional level. Even professionals will be happy with the level of color accuracy that can be achieved with proper calibration and profiling. Great values are below 1 for the average delta E and below 3 for the maximum delta E, so the 27i can be calibrated very accurately and is on par with the VG270UP I quoted earlier. I've also linked the ICC file in the description below. Use it with these color settings in the monitor's OSD, but keep in mind that this is not a substitute for an individual calibration and profiling. Now, as the Omen's panel is an IPS with nano coating, a wide color gamut can be expected, and the measurements don't disappoint. In fact, I actually think my meter is the limiting factor here, so I get about 90% coverage for Adobe RGB and DCI-P3. The important sRGB color space is pretty much completely covered. The gamut volume is much bigger with a huge 1.4 times that of sRGB. So the 27i can display a wide range of colors, which is great for photo and video editing, though this comes with the usual caveats like the oversaturated colors without profiling or in non-color managed applications. Unfortunately, the Omen doesn't support a sRGB mode, which could be used to clamp the color gamut. Despite 8 bits per channel being a bit sparse for such a wide range of colors, I didn't notice any bending artifacts under normal usage. So what about 10-bit? The Omen is capable of 10-bit or 8-bit plus FRC to be precise, but there's a catch. Only refresh rates up to 120Hz are supported. To achieve 165 or even just 144Hz, the color depth needs to be shrunk to 8 bits. This is due to the unlucky choice of a DisplayPort 1.2 input, which only can support data rates up to roughly 17 gigabit per second. The full 165Hz at 10 bits would need slightly north of 20 gigabit per second. Interestingly enough, the LG counterpart with the same panel has a DisplayPort 1.4 input, which is plenty for 10 bits and 165Hz. But the LG on the other hand is capped at 144Hz. They surely did some weird product segmentation here. Maybe this was part of LG's conditions for HP and ViewSonic to use their panel. Who knows? Though I really wonder why LG kept their monitor at 144 when this panel obviously does 165Hz no problem. Admittedly, the difference between those refresh rates is extremely subtle, but having a few hertz more doesn't hurt either, especially not from a marketing perspective. The HP by all means is advertised as a 165Hz gaming monitor and fully lives up to that. First-person shooter are as responsive and crisp as you would expect at this refresh rate. Granted, you have a beefy enough graphics card to push those frame rates at a 1440p resolution. Plan to lose about a third of your FPS when upgrading from 1080p. Regardless of your GPU brand of choice, you will get adaptive sync either in the form of AMD's FreeSync or Nvidia's G-Sync. The 27i has passed Nvidia's criteria and was therefore granted the G-Sync compatible certification. Keep in mind that using adaptive sync will need an FPS cap below the maximum refresh rate. This ensures that the frame rate always stays inside the adaptive sync window. How much you will have to cap below 165Hz will vary across different games and FPS limiters. With Valorant, for instance, I needed to cap at 156 FPS to get rid of any tearing. Now, a crisp and sharp representation of moving objects needs some decent pixel response times as well. As usual, I've used Blurbuster's pursuit camera technique to capture a visual representation of the monitor's motion characteristics. The Omen 27i features 4 different strengths of overdrive, called level 1 to 4, with level 4 being the most extreme overdrive setting. There's no backlight strobing or other motion blur reduction modes available. Let's start with 165Hz, which surely is the most interesting refresh rate, as most people will have the monitor running at its max or will try to get as close as possible when using adaptive sync. Even the lowest overdrive setting shows only a small amount of ghosting. This can be seen at the left, hence trailing edge of the UFO. Going up to level 2 pretty much eliminates ghosting. There's only a faint bit of ghosting left that won't be perceivable in real gaming situations. This is an excellent result that usually would only be expected by a TN panel, but not by an IPS. Level 3 is very usable as well, though inverse ghosting starts to appear, as can be seen by the slight cyan and blue edge on the left. At 165Hz, level 3 is just as usable as level 2, they both feature pretty much identical amounts of ghosting, level 2 showing normal, while level 3 showing inverse ghosting. However, I recommend using level 2 nevertheless, as I will explain in just a minute. Let's quickly cover level 4. This is obviously the marketing mode that's usually implemented to somewhat truthfully print something like 1 millisecond response time onto the box. I find this a bit sketchy as the overshoot is so extreme, this mode is practically unusable. This tactic is by far not exclusive to HP, pretty much every other monitor brand out there is just as guilty as well. At a refresh rate of 144Hz, things are very similar to 165Hz, though the overshoot is stronger at lower overdrive levels. It's already too strong at level 3, so level 2 is the best choice here. Now, the performance at 144Hz can also be important when using the Omen at 165Hz with adaptive sync. This is as FreeSync or G-Sync couple the refresh rate to the frame rate. So the actual refresh rate can often be significantly below 165Hz. This is especially important as both Free and G-Sync require an FPS cap below the maximum refresh rate to safely stay inside the adaptive sync window. So the actual refresh rate may often be closer to 144Hz. Long story short, stay with level 2 when using adaptive sync at 165Hz. 144Hz is the maximum refresh rate of the Acer 270UP, so we compare both monitors at this refresh rate. The Acer shows a decent result, but fairly average for an IPS panel. The Omen, however, really is on its own level and has significantly less ghosting. Whether you are sensitive to ghosting or not will decide if this difference is critical or negligible while gaming. I for one cannot be bothered by a bit of ghosting, however there's no denying that the Omen's performance is vastly superior to the Acer's. Let's quickly cover 120Hz as a few people might actually be interested running this to get the before mentioned 10 bits of color depth. Again, inverse ghosting starts to occur at the upper levels. Level 3 is getting worse, so level 2 to 1 would be a good choice here. The 27i continues to deliver great ghosting performance, but as you can see, the motion blur rises as the refresh rate decreases. To be clear, this is by any means not the fault of the Omen, but the expected phenomenon with decreasing refresh rates. This becomes even clearer when looking at the 60Hz captures. I don't know why anyone would run the 27i at 60Hz, but here are the images, so feel free to pause the video if you'd like to take a closer look. Now, what does it all mean for gaming or color grading on the Omen 27i? Should you buy the LG or ViewSonic with the same panel instead? Or even save some money and go for something like the Acer VG270UP that I mentioned a few times during this video? The Omen 27i is a great monitor. It stands out with its superior motion performance while maintaining most of the benefits of an IPS panel. Viewing angles, color gamut and accuracy leave no room for criticism, while the black level and therefore the contrast ratio are a bit disappointing. It's mostly a monitor made for gamers who want that TN panel-like performance without making big compromises regarding overall picture quality and resolution. Photo or video editing will work great as well, but the 27i would not be my first recommendation, largely to the underwhelming contrast ratio. As the Omen, LG and ViewSonic use the exact same panel, the overall picture quality can be expected to be virtually identical. Pretty much the same is true for the motion performance. The Omen 27i and ViewSonic XG270QG will have the slight edge over the LG thanks to their 165Hz refresh rate. Response times and therefore ghosting performance could vary slightly due to different overdrive implementations, with negligible differences for real-world usage. So between those three models it really comes down to pricing in your region and maybe design preferences. The Omen and the LG will likely cost the same, with the ViewSonic usually costing a bit more. So in most cases the LG or Omen are the better choice. If you want to save a few bucks, you should consider the VG270UP, which delivers similar color performance and an even higher contrast ratio than the Omen. The Acer's ghosting performance, however, is not as good, which should be considered if this is something you are sensitive to. Also, the Omen supports height adjustment and delivers the overall better build quality. Both monitors are great choices for their respective prices and fulfill slightly different needs. You will find the review of the VG270UP linked in the description below. Also, Tim from Hardware Unboxed did a fantastic review of the 27i's counterparts with the same panel from ViewSonic and LG that I will also link in the description. Consider to subscribe and thanks for watching.